Hi, my name is Rylee Marshall and I go to 8th grade at Hidden River. I'm going to read Apples and Cinnamon. It was autumn, and the nostalgic, spicy, sweet scent of apples and cinnamon filled the air. I watched the shockingly beautiful evergreens outside the car window blur by as my sister drove down the forest road, the car bumping and rattling like a crazy roller coaster ride every time we hit a patch of gravel. Rebecca glanced back at me. "You okay back there? We're about to hit a really bumpy part." I groaned, and she laughed, a tinkling sound like that of a bell. It was clear and true, unlike my laugh, which was goose honk meets elephant meets squeaky shoe. Oh well. She shook her auburn head to get some hair out of her face as she drove, and I begrudgingly put my hand up and brushed my own Hershey's chocolate-colored hair aside. We were sisters, but looked nothing like it. I was fairly short like my dad had been, but she had taken after our mom and was tall, with large hands and huge eyes. "Well, keep your chin up, sis. We're almost there." I settled back and consented to stare out the window. Back in my home state of Arizona, that wouldn't have been as exciting. But now that we were in Washington State, every tree seemed like a miracle, and every flash of green that sped by the window was breathtaking. We pulled into the driveway of the dilapidated old house, and I was abruptly shaken out of my thoughts. Literally, as we hit the last stretch of gravel, my bones rattled and my teeth chattered, like it was 15 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which it wasn't. It was actually a fairly nice day, for Washington, or so I'm told, and I took a deep breath of rainy day air as I stepped out of my sister's car. The wind whipped all around me, sending my hair into a wild frenzy, and I laughed. "Well, I guess we made it, Madison," Rebecca remarked with an air of disappointment in her voice. I turned to her in bewilderment. "What do you mean?" I asked her. She wrinkled her face in displeasure. "When Mom told us about this place, I expected it to be in better condition, maybe?" I shook my head and turned back to the house. "I don't know what you're talking about." The house was fairly large and had been painted a lovely coffee color originally, but the sun and rain had weathered and bleached it until it was the color of just cut wood. Not unlike many abandoned houses in Washington, native blackberry bushes had overgrown the edges of the yard, and I could see overripe blackberries weighing them down. Their season was in summer, and no one had been around to pick them. Strangely, I didn't mind their presence. It looked cozy, like a house out of a fairy tale. There were 2 huge trees in the front yard, and the thick green grass was blanketed with paint-like splashes of scarlet, pumpkin, golden, and caramel-colored leaves. I will admit, it took quite a bit of self-control to restrain myself from running over and jumping into them. One small flower bed by the front steps was bursting with weeds, but I could see the remnants of flowers that were slowly dying away. A burst of red and white striped tulips surrounded by vibrant yellow and purple ones were the only flowers still hanging on, but even they were on their last breaths. In a sense, it was painful to see the once beautiful house in this condition, but it still had a quaint, movie-like quality to it, like a home frozen in time, unnoticed by the world. Rebecca, who looked unimpressed, and I walked up the still intact front steps to the set of double doors. They were still painted an original dark brown, and the silver handle had rusted, breaking the lock, but it worked well enough. We cautiously entered the house and were surprised at how it looked from the interior. From the outside, it had seemed like the inside would be full of vermin and dry leaves, but it was surprisingly well kept for a house almost 50 years empty. Faded, dusty, yet still beautiful paintings hung on the walls, gems of their former selves and shadows of the past. Lawn curtains lay crumpled on the floor as if they had been knocked over by the wind, and a small tree branch was coming in through a large window at the top. A little bird perched on it, but quickly flew back out the window as we stepped closer. Cobwebs hung all around the house like lace, and although there were no spiders in sight, I shivered nonetheless. The house smelled of summer days filled with blue raspberry popsicles, and winter evenings bedazzled in spearmint and the frosty smell of Christmas. I caught a whiff of spring flowers near the windows, and the sweet apple cidery smell of autumn hung in the kitchen. We walked to the first floor of the house, and from the various outdated kitchen gadgets and a supply of old, now antique books, it was like a secret passageway just waiting to be explored. We had come because of our great-great-great-grandma Rylee, who had lived far apart from her family members. Well, no, that wasn't quite true. We had come because our mom had forced us. Well, that definitely wasn't true either. It had all started when our father passed away from cancer while we were still fairly young. After Rebecca and I had grown older, our mom started to take us around to the hometowns of his grandparents and their grandparents to truly connect with our family history, as she called it. Even though it was inspirational to visit places my father knew about and visited himself, it hurt more than ever as we traveled from place to place. With every road I asked myself, did my father travel this road? And with every home we visited, I found myself wondering, did my father play here as a child? It was like rummaging through pieces of an incredibly painful past. No matter how long it's been, there's a piece of your heart that still aches. And then came the accident. A lone tear splashed on my cheek, although it felt like a waterfall of emotion. I angrily brushed it away, hoping Rebecca didn't notice. She didn't, as she carefully inspected each item in the living room. My mom had been driving home from work one day when an out-of-control semi on the freeway smashed into her car. I'm sure you can understand the rest of the story. And so, while cleaning out our old home, Rebecca and I found a piece of paper. "My girls," it read, "if you are reading this, I must have passed away. If I have not, and you are reading my things, put it down. Go find something else to do. There will be plenty of time later. There is one thing you must understand, though, if I am truly gone. Visit the home of your great-great-great-grandma Rylee. You must. This is my one wish for you two. It may seem pointless, too hard, utterly impossible, and of no real worth. But I promise that it is one of the most important things you could do as you try to cope with the grief of both your fathers and my passing. Please, my dears, go swiftly. I love you with all my heart." And so, off we went to find the home of someone we had hardly ever heard about. Someone we had never before seen any photos of or even met. Rylee had lived in the era of COVID-19 back in 2021. Well, it was 21 now, and I saw no reason to find her childhood house and past life. But my mom had insisted in her letter that it was vital. Rebecca was no longer a minor, as she was around 5 years older than me and I was turning 14. So we gathered the rainy day fund my mom had saved her things like this, and off we drove. And now, we were here. I took a step toward the stairs, which had been once fully carpeted. Now though, holes from moths and other insects showed the dark wood underneath. "I have to go upstairs," I yelled to Rebecca, who froze from the kitchen. "Is it safe?" she called back. "I don't know, but Mom would have wanted us to find Rylee's room," I shouted and took my first step. Before long, I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned around to see an anxious-looking Rebecca. She raised a threatening eyebrow. She watched me take another step up the staircase. "You had better be careful," she warned me. "If you fall and break your neck, you are in so much trouble." I snorted and instantly regretted it, as I let go of the railing momentarily. Grabbing onto it as if my life depended upon it, I took a deep, shaky breath and continued. Heights were not Rebecca's things, and she shivered with fear as I wearily took another step. I winced as the old wooden stairs creaked and groaned, and each noise sent shivers on my spine. The water-corrupted flooring looked sturdy, but I knew looks could be deceiving. Finally, I was upstairs. To the left was Rylee's bedroom. I could tell because of the large paper sign it had on the front of the door. "Rylee's room. Do not come in." I was a little embarrassed about breaking that rule, but she had died many years ago, and no one would be around to see me violating it. I carefully slipped inside the room. It was fairly neat, and everything from the bedding to the bookshelf to the basket chair was color coordinated. I smiled. It was so like my own room back at home, and I had a feeling that Rylee might have been my twin, until some weird time travel machine messed it up. Of course, that didn't happen, but it immediately endeared her to me. I laughed at the thought and took a look around the room. Various photos and frames were hung on the walls, no longer level, which probably would have annoyed her excessively had she been there to see her old room, and a large box that read, "Dowries, don't you dare touch," sat on the ground, pushed into a lonely, forgotten corner. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and I wrinkled my nose as I used my shirt sleeve to brush it off. I carefully ripped the thick duct tape off the box and opened the cardboard flaps. The inside of the box was covered in yellow and white flowered paper, and stacks of journals, some of them looking brand new, lay inside. I carefully pulled out the first one and flipped through it. I had felt kind of bad about reading this poor girl's journal, but I reasoned to myself, she was my great-great-great-grandma, and my mom had wanted us to learn about her history somehow. As we were some of her only direct living descendants, and the people who knew her weren't alive any longer, this was the only way we could learn about her life. I read the first entry that jumped out at me. I just wish we could go back at school. Today, when I went to church, it seemed like a completely normal day. I'd been at school, talking to my friends, secretly running through the hallways to get to class when no one saw it, eating the unhealthy things on my lunch first, all the things one does when they're living a completely normal middle school life. And then I went to church and got the news. We're not going to school for 6 weeks. Everything that I'm looking forward to in my life is going to be canceled. I'm part of drama club, canceled. We have weekly activities at my church, canceled. 7th grade, canceled. What am I going to do? Troubled, I turned to the next page, which was the next day's entry. Hi. Well, things are crazy today as well. Would you believe that there's a horrible disease sweeping the world, and that's the cause of all of this? Well, it's true. School is completely canceled for 6 weeks, and I thought we'd maybe be doing schoolwork at home or something. No, it's like half of summer vacation is in the middle of the school year. Ugh, I'm so fed up with it all. The diary entry abruptly ended, and I flipped to the next page. Gasping, I read the date. 2 months had passed, and Rylee hadn't even written in her journal? I laughed a little at my shock, imagining what would happen if someone was to read my journal. I would write in it maybe every few years? Plus, I jumped around from section to section, so maybe she was just fine after all. I continued to flip through the entries until I got to the very last one. It started, "You will never believe it. I am literally the most excited I have ever been. Check the blue and white journal for more." And then it ended, right there on the last page where she was just about to tell me all about how excited she was. I considered shouting "Arg" at the ceiling, but to be honest, I wasn't in the mood for a roof avalanche today. Frantic now, I dug through the box until I finally found the blue and white striped journal that came next. It was locked, but I groped for the keys at the bottom of the box. I'd seen the shiny glow of silver and hoped they would work. Fishing them out, I carefully unlocked the thick book and opened the weathered pages. Score! After once again ignoring the "don't read" notice, I began to devour her words in earnest, strangely eager to learn about this person that I had never before met, yet I already felt like I knew. I went to school today, and it was like coming home after a long, tiring journey. I mean, how many times have I imagined walking down the green and white tiled halls, hearing the noise of people talking once more? When we were stuck at home in COVID, every day felt like I was living in an insane asylum. I'd wake up and all would be quiet and the sound would tear at my brain, confronting it most awfully. There'd be times in the night where I'd look out in the window onto the silent street with not even one car driving through our neighborhood. The only light would be the dim glow of the street lights, and it'd feel like I was legitimately the only person in the entire world. Every day that I worked from home or logged off of Zoom, it would seem like every being on Earth had died. The weekends were torture, and while some exclaimed joyfully over the breaks and day off, I dreaded them like a dentist appointment or a shot in the arm at your next checkup. I avoided them like the plague, and yet they always crept up on me. It was like social interaction was fuel, and I was quickly running low. And now, to know that people exist, to see them talking and gossiping and laughing and crying and complaining is the most incredible thing I could witness. To know that I am one out of billions of humans on this small green and blue spinning glass marble we call home is revolutionary. It's the smallest of things, but it impacts me in the biggest of ways. I'm so grateful for the little things that people did that annoyed me so much before. Now I let my mind embrace them with gladness. What surprises me again and again is how much people have grown and changed. I like to say that I had a growth spurt, which I did, but everyone else did too, so it looks like I shrank. At this point, I have accepted my fate. Here I stopped and laughed, blissfully happy for this vivacious girl who had come before me and paved the way for a long line of strong, feisty, independent women. I studied the words again, a sharp pain shooting up my hunched over back and darting into my neck. I didn't care though. Anyway, it was a pretty great day, even if I maybe didn't recognize everyone at first. I'm so despondent that we can't have the whole school all together, but at least I get to be with some of my friends. This will be an 8th grade year to remember for sure. In ELA, we get to do these different writing prompts each day. I usually don't like writing prompts because they seem to chain my creativity if that's possible, but my teacher, Miss Verde, somehow makes them incredibly interesting. We did a pre-test in math, and the best thing that could be said about our skills was that we knew what a square was. It was both horribly sad and hilariously funny. Of course, lunch was great, which sounds strange, but it was so refreshing to take off my mask for once. I know they're important, but it's nice to see everyone the way it used to be before COVID. And I'm glad we can finally use the HRMS track as well. Again, I'm horribly disappointed that some of my friends are in the first group or A cohort, but I've already begun to talk to and even laugh and joke around with some of the others in my group. It's most definitely a blessing in disguise. I guess I should go. Tomorrow I have an asynchronous day, which means I work from home using work my teachers pre-assign. It sounds boring, but it's pretty low-key and unstressful. I'm so glad that they stayed so optimistic during quarantine, even when I definitely haven't. Alright, see you later. The entry drew to a close, and I carefully shut the book with a smile on my face. I felt even more now like Rylee was my sister. I think I knew why Mom wanted me and Rebecca to visit her house. But an even bigger surprise came when I looked over the different things in her room. It was me? I stepped closer to a photo tacked to the aquamarine painted walls. 2 girls stood in front of a building, smiling at each other. One of them had long, light brown hair and hazel blue eyes. She was slightly taller than the other, who had dark brunette hair, brown eyes with flecks of gold, and an easy smile. I shook my head to clear it and peered at the faded photo again. The girl with the dark brown hair, she looked exactly like me. It was a Polaroid photo, which was a style of picture that was steadily coming back at the time of my grandma's life, and I read the words on the bottom white part. Rylee and Allie, last day of 8th grade. I gasped. That was Rylee? No wonder my mom had wanted us to visit. Rylee could have been my twin in more ways than one. I felt a hot tear run down my cheek, and I quickly brushed it away. How was I crying? I hardly knew this girl. I hadn't gone through years of disease and social quarantine, but yet I somehow knew what it was like by her words. I smiled and looked around some more. Various awards and paintings hung on the walls, and a large chart of her favorite songs hung on the wall. They were mostly Disney and gospel music. It was, in all honesty, like a scene from my heart, from my memories, from my past. I continued to search the room, every nook, every cranny. I had to learn more about Rylee. I needed to. I finally found something of interest. The letter was stuck behind the closet door, hidden among various school outfits and old notebooks. I looked through them earlier, and they were filled with the most random of stories, including one very scary 6-year-old drawing of a little girl with huge blue hair flying a hot air balloon. From what I knew about Rylee before I visited, she had been an avid writer, and all the little details about her life were coming together now. The blue, loose-leaf sheet of paper, folded and creased 100 times over, was stuck in the door, and it took a few solid yanks to retrieve it. Carefully unfolding it, I inhaled sharply, a sort of elevated gasp, as I saw to whom it was addressed. Grandma Melissa? I whispered, hardly daring to breathe. I brushed her name on the paper with the tips of my fingers. Then I slowly read it aloud, not quite understanding. My dearest Melissa, I cannot express how excited I am that you were to be wed to my great-grandson, Frederick. As you may know, based on the first sentence of this letter, I am his great-grandma Rylee. I believe we met at the family reunion buffet a few years ago. When Frederick introduced you as his girlfriend, I will admit I hoped right there and then that someday you would join our family. You are a wonderful young lady, and I wish you the best of luck. It was simply signed, Rylee, and I sat in stunned silence. Why did this prick my heart? And then I understood. My grandma had died years before, but when she talked about her great-grandma-in-law, if that's what it's called, she never seemed to like her much. She said that Rylee was always cruel to her, always hated her, even though my father had refuted that claim over and over again. Now seeing this letter showed me that my father had been right. Rylee and Melissa must have argued, and I assumed that Melissa never quite got over it. I set it down and looked through the other items in the room. The room seemed rather sparse, as compared to the vivid picture Rylee had painted of it in one of her journals. And yet it was bright and cheerful in its own way. A few minutes later, I had decided there was nothing else all that exciting, and I was about to exit the room. From there, Rebecca and I would leave. And then I saw it. Another sheet of paper hurriedly torn from a notebook. It was crumpled and balled up on the floor, right beneath the bed. A shine of golden glitter on it caught my eye, and I carefully reached under the bed to retrieve it. Was it? I couldn't finish the question, not even in my brain. The disappointment would be too bitter if the hope suspended in my heart failed, but the golden streak of glitter glue spoke for itself. You see, golden glitter glue was my mom's trademark. As I knitted and uncrumpled the sheet, I breathed in the familiar smell of her perfume wafting off the starchy paper. It smelled like cinnamon and apples, and just the scent alone brought tears to my eyes. Unlike many times before, I didn't bother to wipe them away. Dear Madison and Rebecca, if you have found this, you have taken my advice and visited your great-great-great-grandma Rylee's house. Thank you. You see, darlings, Rylee's story is not unlike your own. By now, I have passed away, and no doubt that is gnawing, eating, tearing at your hearts, and draining the life from them. Rylee felt like that too. But then, look what happened. She returned to just a little bit of the life she knew. She went to school. It was such a simple, normal, basic thing, and that made all the difference. It was natural. It was the life she had left behind when COVID hit. Follow in her footsteps. The light will come. Plant a tree. Grow some flowers. Do whatever it takes to witness the beauty of a new life in the spring. I promise if you do, if you hold to all I have taught you, you will be happy in the end. I love you both, and don't forget to shine. And please, please, always remember, I am so very, very proud of you both. I read the last line aloud. Love, Mom. I dropped to the ground and began to cry again, not tears of despondency or despair, but tears of utter joy. I had done it. We had done it. Our mom was proud of us. We had not let her down. Rylee, in a way, was I, and I was her. We were so similar, so alike in personality and appearance and experience. I exhaled with a beautiful glory of joy and took a step out of the room. Then I heard quick footsteps coming up the stairs, and I froze. Rebecca? I hesitantly called. She appeared around the corner. I heard crying and was scared you were hurt. She apologized. Are you okay? I smiled, for it seemed like the first time in 5 months since the accident. I have never been better. She looked at me quizzically, and I held up a letter. Once again, like it always had. In the past, in the present, In the future, the spicy sweet scent of apples and cinnamon filled the air. The end.